Right. So, you
It's a
know
big
how
breakthrough.
there are some
But
mysteries from
what
the
do you think?
past that just like really get their hooks in you?
Oh, yeah.
Like you just can't let them go?
Totally.
And for me, one of those has always been King Tut, King Tutankhamun.
Mm-hmm.
What really caused his death? I mean, was it murder? Was it an accident? Was it something else entirely?
Some
Yeah.
are saying
Yeah.
malaria.
It's a question that's been around forever, right?
Right. And for like decades, it's just been there's all these theories swirling around.
Yeah.
But today we're gonna cut through all that speculation.
Right.
We're gonna look at like the hard scientific evidence.
Right.
What does the science tell us?
That's what we're here for.
Exactly. And this is a deep dive, right?
Let's do a deep dive.
Into this enduring puzzle of how the boy king died.
The Boy King.
Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
Forget the rumors, forget the dramatic interpretations.
Right. Just the facts.
Just the facts, exactly. The science and the source material we've got is, well, it's pretty fascinating.
Okay, lay it on me.
We've got this recent article. It details some really groundbreaking DNA analysis.
DNA?
Yeah, DNA analysis. And it's not just of Tut, it's of a number of royal mummies.
So they were able to compare and contrast, get some family history.
Exactly.
Okay.
It can really change how we understand, history.
Sure.
So what's our mission today?
Well, I think our mission today is to really get to the bottom of what's the most likely cause of death?
Yeah.
What really happened to King Tut? All based on this latest science, and especially this DNA analysis.
Based on the DNA evidence.
What did they find that, maybe some of the other theories couldn't really get to before?
Right, exactly. So to unpack this a little bit,
Okay.
the article talks about this multi-year investigation, years of work,
That's impressive.
really, into the DNA analysis of, like I said, not just Tut, but 11 royal mummies.
11. Wow, that's a lot of DNA.
That's a huge commitment
It is, yeah,
Yes.
to uncovering the truth.
to finding out the truth.
Yeah. And so that's part of what makes it so significant.
And this is what the article really highlights as, pretty astonishing.
Okay.
It turns out that King Tut's parents were most likely full siblings.
Full siblings. Whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not good, right?
Well, to us today,
Right. To us today, we're like, oh, that's going to lead to some problems.
for sure.
Yeah.
But it's important to put this in historical context.
Okay.
As the article explains, this close inbreeding, it sounds super alarming to us.
Yeah.
But in ancient Egypt, in the royal families,
Oh, so it wasn't that unusual.
it was not unusual at all. It was actually a strategy.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
And the article quotes the geneticist, Yahya Gad.
Okay.
He says that their goal was to keep the bloodline pure.
To keep it pure, okay.
Yeah, to maintain the dynasty's power within a small group.
Okay, so it was about, like, control and power.
Exactly. Power.
Okay, that makes sense.
And, they believed that this reinforced their divine right to rule.
Oh, interesting. So they thought that their bloodline was somehow connected to the gods, that it had to be kept pure.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
But as Gad also points out in the article, he says it came at a cost.
Yeah, there's always a cost.
And that cost likely impacted Tut's health.
Yeah. There's going to be consequences to that kind of inbreeding, right?
For sure.
So what did it mean for his physical condition? What did this inbreeding actually look like in his life?
Yeah, what were the consequences?
Yeah, what are the consequences?
So the article goes into some pretty specific genetic issues.
Okay.
So the DNA analysis revealed that Tutankhamun suffered from several congenital health problems.
Okay. Congenital, meaning like from birth.
From birth, yeah.
Gotcha.
That were likely because of his genes.
Okay, so passed down from the parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what kind of problems?
Well, one that stands out, it's called Kohler disease 2.
Kohler disease
Okay.
2.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's not like a common one you hear about all the time.
No. So for those of us who are not doctors, can you break that down a little bit? What is that? How would that have affected him?
Yeah, for sure. So Kohler disease 2 is this rare bone disorder.
A bone disorder, okay.
Yeah, and it's really painful.
Oof, painful.
Yeah, and it affects the bones in the foot.
The foot, okay.
Yeah, and basically what happens is there's reduced blood flow.
Reduced blood flow to the foot. Oh.
The bones in the foot.
Okay.
And that leads to the death of the bone tissue.
Oh, wow. So like the bone is essentially dying.
Yeah, it's called necrosis.
Necrosis, okay.
So imagine trying to walk.
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
with that kind of damage in your foot
Yeah, not easy.
all the time.
Chronic pain, probably.
Yeah. And the article mentions that, they did these advanced X-ray imaging.
CT scans.
CT scans, right.
Yeah.
And they confirmed necrosis in Tut's left foot.
So they actually saw it.
Yeah, like the imaging shows it.
Okay, so that's pretty solid evidence, right?
It is.
That's
it
a
really
question
is.
That
below.
supports the
Comment.
DNA findings, right?
Exactly. Like they match up.
Right.
And then, you think about this. In his tomb, they found over 130 walking canes.
130 walking canes.
Yeah.
That's more than a few, right?
Yeah.
He must have needed them, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't just collecting them for fun.
No, I don't think so.
130.
And the article calls it a somber testament
Somber, yeah.
to his mobility issues.
Yeah, so it really does seem like he had trouble walking for a lot of his life.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, right? I mean, to be a young pharaoh, you're expected to lead these big processions. You're expected to be a part of all these important ceremonies.
Right, to be strong and powerful.
Exactly. But if you're struggling to walk,
You can see the image.
that's got to be tough.
Yeah,
How
it
the
gives you a
leg
very
is.
different perspective.
A very different perspective on his life.
On his life.
Less of the powerful pharaoh, more of a kid who's struggling with some health issues.
Right, much more vulnerable
Yeah.
than we usually imagine him.
Right.
But it doesn't end there.
Okay.
The genetics weren't the only health challenge.
Right, because we were talking about malaria.
Yeah, the article also talks about malaria.
Okay.
And the DNA tests actually showed that King Tut had contracted malaria multiple times.
Multiple times. Okay.
Yeah, in his life. And, we got to remember, this was thousands of years ago.
Right. No modern medicine,
No modern medicine.
no antibiotics, nothing like that.
Yeah.
How was it possible?
So malaria back then, as the article points out, it was often fatal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, completely different situation than today.
Right. Because today, you can usually get treated for malaria and, you'll be fine.
Exactly. But back then, it was a death sentence in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And the article quotes Tim Batty from the Tutankhamun exhibition.
Okay.
And he says that these repeated bouts of malaria, especially when combined with his weakened immune system.
Right, because we already knew he's got all these other problems.
Yeah, all these other issues. And the bone deformities,
Yeah.
it probably played a huge role in his early death.
Yeah, so it wasn't just one thing. It was like a perfect storm.
Yeah. Like a combination of factors.
Yeah.
So to put it all together, what the research team concluded, and the article highlights this, is that the necrosis in his foot,
Okay.
the walking problems that caused,
Yeah.
and these repeated malaria infections led to his death
Okay.
at only 18 years old,
18.
after just 9 years of ruling.
That's so young.
Yeah, it's a tragic picture.
It is. It's a tragic story. And, it moves us away from these ideas of, like you said, murder or poisoning or these sort of dramatic deaths.
Right.
It makes it much more real, I guess,
Yeah, more grounded.
Yeah, more grounded.
But even with all this evidence
Yeah.
pointing in this direction, the DNA evidence, the article does say the debate isn't completely over.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's an alternative theory.
All right, what's the alternative?
It was proposed back in 2022 by a French Egyptologist
Okay.
named Marc Gabold.
Mark Kabul.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What does he think?
So he's got a different interpretation
Okay.
about Tut's parentage.
About his parents. Okay.
Yeah. He suggests that Tut's mother was not Akhenaten's sister,
Okay.
but his cousin, Nefertiti.
Nefertiti. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's saying Akhenaten and Nefertiti, who were cousins,
Cousins?
were Tut's parents.
Yeah, that's his theory.
Okay, interesting. So why does he think that?
Well, his reasoning is that generations of marriages between cousins in the royal family could produce DNA that looks like it's from siblings.
Oh, so the DNA could be similar enough that it would be hard to tell?
Yeah, it could be misleading.
Okay, that makes sense.
And he actually said in a lecture
Okay.
at Harvard University
Wow, Harvard.
that, the DNA can look like a brother-sister relationship,
Even if they're not.
even if they're more distant, like cousins.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's not necessarily disagreeing with the DNA evidence.
No, not the close link.
Right. But he's just offering a different explanation for it.
Yeah, just a slightly different way of looking at it.
Okay, so it's a different branch, maybe
Right.
on the family tree, but still within that close circle of relatives.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. But, is everyone on board with this theory?
Well, not really.
Okay.
The article mentions Zahi Hawass,
Vahiwas, yeah.
who, for people who don't know, he's a big name in Egyptian archaeology.
He's a big deal, right?
Yeah, he's a big deal. He was
fine.
the former head of Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities.
Wow.
And he was actually the lead author of the 2010 study that was one of the first to use DNA analysis
He's a very
to
well-known
look at
person.
the royal family.
So he's been involved in this research for a while.
Yeah, he's very connected to it.
Okay, so what does he think about Gabold's theory?
Well, he firmly rejects it.
Rejects it, okay.
Yeah.
So he's sticking with the siblings.
Sticking with the siblings, he says the genetic evidence really strongly supports that.
Okay.
And he also says that there's no archaeological data,
Okay, so there's nothing to back up Gabold's claim?
not right now,
Okay.
that Nefertiti was Tut's mother.
So it's kind of a debate still.
It's a debate, and I think it's a good example of how, even with all the advances in DNA analysis, science is about interpretation,
Right.
and there can be different viewpoints.
It's not always black and white, right?
No, and especially with something as complex as ancient history.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even though his reign was so short,
Yeah.
and he clearly had all these health problems,
Right.
the article reminds us that Tutankhamun is still a huge figure in history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, King Tut, everybody knows King
Yeah.
Tut.
Yeah.
Why is that, though? I mean, he wasn't pharaoh for very long, like you said.
Right. And a lot of it has to do with the discovery of his tomb
Oh, yeah?
in 1922
Right. By Howard Carter.
by Howard Carter.
Yeah, that was a huge deal.
Huge deal. And it was almost completely intact.
Which is very rare, right, for Egyptian tombs.
So rare, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they found over 5,000 artifacts.
5,000.
It's priceless.
Wow.
The gold burial mask, the one you see everywhere.
Oh, yeah, everyone knows that mask.
It gave us this unprecedented look into Egyptian royal life.
It's like a time capsule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, as the article points out, figuring out exactly how someone died from mummified remains is really hard.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, the body's been through a lot, right?
Yeah, thousands of years.
Thousands of years, yeah. And the mummification process itself
Yeah, it changes things.
changes things. So it's hard to tell what happened.
Which is why these advances in genetic testing
Right.
and CT scans
Yeah.
are so important.
They give us a new way of looking at it.
It's like a whole new set of tools
Exactly.
to investigate this. And they've allowed scientists to come up with this really compelling story
Right, to put together the pieces.
about Tut's life and death.
And what's the story that they're telling?
Well, it's a sad one.
Okay.
The latest findings, they show us a young ruler
Yeah.
born into a system that made him genetically weak.
Right, because of that inbreeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was suffering from this bone disorder that made it hard to walk.
Great, the Kohler disease.
Yeah. And he ended up dying from these repeated infections.
Malaria. Yeah.
And it's very different from the picture of a strong, healthy pharaoh.
Right, it kind of humanizes him a little bit.
Yeah. Makes him more relatable.
Yeah, exactly. You think about this powerful king, but he was just a kid who was, sick and in pain.
Yeah. And the article, it concludes by saying that Tut's story continues to fascinate us.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
And through science,
We're finally unraveling this royal mystery.
slowly but surely.
Slowly.
Yeah.
I like that.
So,
Still a lot to go.
for you, the listener, I think the main takeaway from this deep dive
Okay.
is that the strongest evidence
Yeah.
points to a combination of things,
All right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Genetic disorders,
Okay.
probably from the inbreeding,
Right.
specifically Kohler disease II and the problems with walking,
Yeah.
and the repeated malaria infections.
Okay.
Those seem to be the most likely cause of his death.
So a perfect storm, basically.
Yeah, and, while the debate about his parents continues,
Yeah.
it just shows how science is always evolving,
Right. Always learning new things, getting new evidence,
right?
and changing our understanding.
Exactly. But it really makes you
Sure.
think, right?
But about what?
This practice of inbreeding,
Yeah.
which was all about, keeping the power in the family.
Keeping that bloodline pure.
Right, pure. But it might have actually contributed to Tut's frailty and suffering.
To his downfall.
And early death.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it?
It is. It really makes you think about the unintended consequences
Yeah.
of these kinds of practices.
Throughout history, right?
Throughout history.
Not just ancient Egypt.
Exactly.
It's everywhere.
So, yeah, something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, it's
What's the
been
cause of
fascinating.
death?
Yeah, it's been great.
Malaria?
Always a pleasure.
What do you think?
Always.
Yeah.
Comment
Again.
it. Thanks.